I have the great honor of introducing our keynote, Nancy Grayson. Hi. I'm really grateful to introduce her. Nancy is a friend. Nancy is a champion. Nancy is a woman who on more than one occasion I have sent a frantic text saying, "Oh my God, I need somebody, can you be the person?" And she's always responded. Nancy's also the Enquirer's 2022 Women of the Year. That award did not make it into her robust awards that you all will be able to read. She's also, as her role at Horizon, has helped raise over $50 million since 2017 to impact Northern Kentucky and the people and the organizations. Thank you, Nancy. She's president and CEO responsible for implementing the vision and strategic direction of Horizon Community Funds, working collaboratively with other community leaders to serve the community needs. She's a recognized leader. She's served on numerous boards, which she's going to share about, and organizations dedicated to improving education, promoting healthy family relationships, and preserving the natural resources and history of Kentucky. She currently serves on the Metropolitan Club Board of Governors, the Endow Kentucky Commission, and the Link Media Board of Directors. Welcome, Nancy Grayson.
The panelists, I think, really teed up our conversation in such a great way today. And so I'm excited to kind of unpack some stories. I have had a very non-traditional pathway to where I am now. I suspect many of you would feel the same. And as women, I think it's okay to acknowledge the fact that we may not have a super direct path to leadership. And so what might that look like? How can we engage others in that pathway and in that journey? First, what I'd like to do is do a quick exercise, and this actually will tee us up for some of the work that you're going to be doing later today, either in breakout sections or as we're contemplating who is part of those circles of influence that you have in your life. So I'd like you to take out a pen. You all have pens at your individual seats. Sheet of paper, maybe your notebook, and write down 3 names. 3 names of people that you feel you're connected to who might have impact for you in your future. This could be a personal connection, it could be a family member, it could be a boss, it could be a colleague, it could be someone in the community that you serve on a board with or that you work out with, or just a connection through a mutual friend. Now think of those 3 people. Think of 3 words that they would say about you. This is your personal brand. And I know at the next act, you guys are going to be spending some time thinking through what is that brand, how do you elevate that brand on social media and otherwise. But write down 3 words that people might say about you specifically, those 3 people. These are my 3 words: catalyst, leader, strategist. I spent some time, I actually have a group of friends, and I would suggest you all consider doing this too. I call them my own board of directors. These are people that I trust. Some have been mentors in the past, one of whom is a sponsor of mine currently. These are others that I really deeply believe in making sure that I think about how do I elevate who I am, both in the workplace and outside of the workplace. Because what you do outside of the workplace is just as, if not more important than what you do inside the workplace too. So how do you promote this brand? Again, we'll be talking about that in the future, but today, let's think about who are the right people to make sure that your brand is spread and accurately done so. Who are the right people who are going to move you forward, and not only in your profession, but in your leadership. I always talk about board service, anything that you do outside of the workplace also is leadership experiences too. In fact, if you were to look at my resume, you'd see my work experience, and then I have a long list of leadership experiences because I think that they really can also come to bear in your professional opportunities as well. So we know that women hold over half of all professional level jobs, but only make up 24% of senior management roles. And as of a study from last year in 2022, only 8% of all Fortune 500 CEOs are women. 83% of women report having a mentor. It's a pretty high percentage. But men are 46% more likely to have, more than women, to have a sponsor. So why does this matter? There's been a study, and it shows in financial terms that sponsorship gives you a statistical benefit of up to 30% for high-profile assignments, for getting those promotions and getting pay raises. So there is a statistical benefit that comes from having a sponsor in your life, at least one. And the panel did a good job, I think, setting us up for this differentiation, thinking through what's a mentor, what's a sponsor. I love the comment of mentorship. We'll talk about that. And these tend to bleed together, but this was probably the clearest visual that I've found that shows the difference between managers, mentors, coaches, and sponsors. Managers tell you what to do, so you know the expectations, you know what the roles of your job are, so they will tell you this is what you need to do in your job. A mentor will talk with you, so you get to bring to the table what it is that you want to talk about. They go back and forth. They may have some suggestions, some advice. A coach will talk to you to help you learn a skill, potentially to help grow a pipeline of connections. But a sponsor talks about you, and this is what we want to focus on today. They are investing themselves in your work, in you, and putting their name on the line. And as we talked about with the mentorship concept, there is a definite overlap. Now, I'm a big sucker for Venn diagrams. I love this one. It's one of my favorite. I have kids. I was a philosophy minor, which is really geeky. I actually went to high school with a Backstreet Boy, so this one makes me laugh like very deeply in terms of the Tell Me Why. Actually, if I'd had a walk-up song today, I probably would have put that one on here just for fun. But this is a little bit different of a Venn diagram if you take a look at it. You can see the overlap between sponsorship and mentorship here. The making of introductions, the giving feedback, giving guidance, advice, these are all incredibly important. And perhaps you might have a mentor already in your life who's providing some of this, and they are a trusted counselor to you. And they're supporting you, they're building that confidence. I know at the Metropolitan Club, where I serve on the board, we have a really great mentorship program, and I know a lot of both chambers, Northern Kentucky and Greater Cincinnati, also have really strong mentorship programs too. And that's important because it allows you to have someone who's going to give you feedback, give you some empathy, and they really aren't expecting much in return. Although I would always argue when you're in a mentoring role, it is kind of a 360 mentor type of a relationship. The mentors get something out of that too. But for a sponsor, this is what happens when you're not in the room with them. What happens when they're in meetings or in conversations, if it's within your company and they're thinking about promotions or potentially assigning a project to you? What happens when they're out in the community? And this is where I want to challenge our idea of sponsors a little bit. What happens when someone is choosing a board position? Or if there's some important connection that needs to be made and they want to speak up for you. This is what a sponsor does. They are putting their name on the line for you. They're putting their own personal brand on the line for you. They're investing in you. So as we think through sponsors, I want to share a few stories of mine and my kind of convoluted way of getting to where I am today at Horizon Community Funds. So one thing that sponsors do is they drive career vision. So they help you to think a little bit further ahead maybe than you would have before because they're going to stretch the boundaries of what it is that you're trying to achieve, which can be intimidating. And for many women, I know I too have a bit of an imposter syndrome, and so sometimes it's hard to overcome that negative self-talk and to think, okay, I can be and do more with the help of someone else. So this is me. Look at my cute dad with those little tinted glasses. Oh, the 90s were such a great time. So this was when I graduated from the University of Kentucky for undergrad. And at that time, I was still exploring what I wanted to do and go to law school. So this is, in my mind, probably the first person that I had. She wouldn't have called herself a sponsor, but if I look back in my life, I think she really is. And I try to make sure all my sponsors have their best headshots because that's just not fair as women. We don't need to be putting negative headshots out there. So this is a really awesome headshot of Penny Miller, who was a professor. She was tenured at the University of Kentucky, an author, well-known. She was just a rock star. She's in their Hall of Fame. She's since retired. But Penny was a professor that I had in political science, so I was pre-law. I did go to law school at University of Cincinnati, but I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I cared about women's issues, children's issues, trying to think through, what that next step might be. So I had her as a professor. We did some work together in class, but after a period of time, I noticed that she had influence in certain spheres that I wanted to be in, and that included state government, that included former governors, that included a lot of research opportunities, fellowships, that type of thing. So I didn't use the term sponsor, but I specifically asked her, I need you to help me move forward, and I think you're the right person, and here's why. So when Amy and others were talking about asking and being specific, it's very important that you do that. And they may not understand what is it to be a sponsor. I know this is a newer term, but I do think it's something that we need to be intentional about. And I think Julie hit the nail on the head with her answer during the panel conversations too. And why did Penny say yes? I showed up, I committed, I did the work. It's not very sexy to talk about it that way, but it was something where she knew my work ethic was there, and that was very important, that she knew that I was going to be someone that she could promote, but that also would get the work done and who would live up to what she was trying to say about me. So that was very important. In a small world, and I find isn't everything a small world these days, and very full circle, I'm actually now back helping her family foundation and consulting them on some work. So it's been really a privilege for me to be able to come back and to sit down and to talk with her, but in a very different capacity, and to know that what she did and what she sparked early on has helped to drive me to the career that I've had today. Again, very non-traditional route, but that being said, she helped to steer it off. Sponsors help enable advancement through experiences. And I think this is where I'd like to highlight getting more involved on boards and nonprofit work and committees. And it's not just because I work for a charitable community foundation. I think this helps to show people outside of the workspace your leadership roles and the things that you might be able to do beyond your role on a day-to-day basis. So this is me a while ago when I had longer hair. My daughter's much younger. They're in med school and undergrad now, and my husband. We were at a blue ribbon ceremony event. This is probably 2007, if I looked at my kids' ages in this picture. And I served on a board for 10 years. That's actually probably longer than I would recommend anybody serving on any one particular board. But the Family Nurturing Center, which prevents child abuse, was something that was very close to my heart. So we're at this event. This, I think, captures the idea that for me, even as a mom, there were things I was trying to do in the community to show that I could be more than just what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And so enter another sponsor. This is Patty Nagelkirk, who is a rock star in her own right. Some of you may know her. She, at the time, was working at the Family Nurturing Center. Since then, she's worked at United Way of Greater Cincinnati, has done work with national organizations. She's actually an ordained minister, which probably explains a lot about what I'm getting ready to say, which is she noticed when I was volunteering and doing my board work that I had this passion and commitment, especially around families and around education. And so when she was in a room with a bunch of other people looking at a potential position for this group that was called Vision 2015 at the time, she mentioned my name and she said, Nancy is such a great leader. I've seen her on the board, she's done this great work, and then she came back to me and said, I think you really should consider this particular position. And so for me, I thought this is a little bit different. Do I want to do this? And she said, think about what your passion is and why you get up and do what you do in the morning. And this is where we come into Ikigai, another Venn diagram. I told you I love these. I will note for any of my friends who understand Japanese better than I do that this is a very westernized version of what Ikigai means. So Ikigai is the reason for getting up in the morning. It's your commitment, it's your passion for why you do what you do every day. So if you look at this Venn diagram, you think about what you love, what you can be paid for, what the world needs, and what you're good at. And again, all of these overlap, and if you are so lucky as to be able to get all four of these, you have found your Ikigai. Patty did not know that word Ikigai at the time, but she did say, Nancy, I know your commitment, I know your passion, you're really good at these following things, this is why I think you'd be a great fit. And so she challenged that idea for me on moving forward and thinking about what is it that I would like to do next in my career. And so I did take that role, and that really has helped me to move along with all of these connections that I had in the community across Greater Cincinnati and in Northern Kentucky. So as you were thinking about your brand, as you're thinking about what you want to get involved with, I think it was Dan who was talking about considering where your passions are when you get involved, think about your ikigai. And this might be something for you to consider later today, or as you're going around when you're doing the speed networking with the nonprofit groups. Are there certain ones that might resonate with you? And how could that benefit your job? Because they all overlap together. Sponsors champion visibility through their own platforms. And when I think about visibility, that may come in a wide variety of cases. Okay, again, longer hair, not a great picture, but I do sing in a group called Suits That Rock. And so it's a bunch of CEOs and CFOs that come together from across greater Cincinnati, and they raise money for youth arts programming. And this was when the feather things were big, and it was, I was singing Janis Joplin. It was quite a trip. So we do that every year. There's a benefit. It impacts the mission that I love. But I was invited to this program by several local CEOs who wanted me to step up, and it was a great way to elevate my platform in more of a fun way. This is John Damashko. I would put his professional headshot, but I think, quite frankly, he is Suits That Rock CEO full-time at this point. So he was a former colleague of mine. I worked with him at Vision 2015 for a period of time, and then moved on to the Education Council. He's a friend. He had been a mentor, but he also wanted me to think a little bit bigger about my next career. I was, and we'll talk about this in the next story too, somebody who was always number two. And so I was not that leader, that CEO yet. And so he wanted me to think a little differently about that. So we would have coffee and talk about it occasionally. And there was this one time where he said, Nancy, there's actually a board I want you to serve on that I think you would really elevate your image. I think it would make you more visible. And that was the Metropolitan Club Board of Governors. So if you're not familiar, it is a membership club available for both sides of the river. But at the end of the day, it's really where a lot of leaders come together and talk about kind of the big ideas for the region. And he said, you need to be in that room so that people start to get to know you a little bit better too. So I said yes, and eventually I became the board chair, just rotated out of that, which I would not suggest. Being a board chair during a global pandemic is pretty challenging in and of itself, but we did make it through, much as the rest of the world did too. And so his guidance, his willingness to put me out there and to say to others, I put my stamp of approval on Nancy, was very important. And it has helped to open other doors, including my current role, because people got to know who I was in the work that I did through that particular role on the board. And then finally, sponsors promote by using their influence in networks. So here's a picture of a group when we had a blue ribbon cutting for the Northern Kentucky Education Council, which was a group that I helped to merge together in my Vision 2015 role of several organizations that ended up becoming this kind of larger backbone organization. And you see a lot of the founding members, the presidents of local universities that are there, chamber, others. I am not in this picture, and this is by design why I'm putting this here. I was the person who was often behind the camera or who was making sure the work was happening, but I was not the one in front. And that was just because of the role, and that was fine. But it was something that kept nagging in the back of my head. It's not that I wanted to be up front, but I wanted to be a decision maker in that room. That was something that was really important to me, not only for the impact that my organization was having, but also for me personally. And this is where Mike Hammonds comes in. So Mike had worked with me in a variety of roles. I was at the Education Council. He was at Learning Grove, which used to be Children Inc., if you're familiar with that organization. And he and I, again, would have coffee and we would talk, and he was serving more in a mentor role. But what I didn't know is he was quietly sponsoring me in the community for what is now the Horizon Community Funds of Northern Kentucky. They were in development and thinking for several years, how do we create this new foundation to support Northern Kentucky? Who would be the right leader? We need to build this from the ground up. My entrepreneurial friends in here, it is one of the toughest things I've ever had to do, so my hat's off to you for all the work that you've done. It is a big task to try to build something from scratch or out of an idea. But that being said, he would go out into the community when they were having these meetings with leaders and kept mentioning my name. And he kept asking me, Nancy, are you considering this as a potential career move? And I said, I don't know. Again, that self-doubt kept coming back in. I'm not sure if I'm ready. Am I the right person? Am I ready to run something like this? And after many conversations and finally the search firm reaching out to me, I did decide to apply. In 5 interviews, that was a long process, later I did get the job, which has just been the experience of a lifetime for me. And here I am at the launch. You can't see all the people in the room. There are about 300 people that showed up this day for our launch at the Metropolitan Club. Actually, you see several of my board members who are sitting here, including the former CEO of Cintas, the former CFO of Kroger. You have higher ed institutions there. Representative Kit Andrews is sitting on the chair. She's on our board too. This was pretty intimidating for me to launch something like this in front of the community because it was taking a very big risk. You might fail, but that was okay because I had people in that room and others that I knew believed in me and who'd put my name out there. And so having that reassurance and knowing that people were fighting for me and for this effort was so incredibly, it was a game changer, quite frankly, for me. So when you think through, again, the benefits of a sponsorship, when you are considering a raise, for those of you who are maybe in a more traditional setting professionally, if you think about it, when 70% of women are resisting asking their boss for a raise, and I don't know why we have more reluctance in asking. I know men typically have a little bit more confidence in asking that. But knowing that if you have a sponsor, you're more likely to not only request, but to succeed in getting that raise. Again, statistically proven. So only 36 of us are approaching our supervisors, our superiors in the role to get a highly visible project. But when we have a sponsor, that number increases to 44%. So who's the right person for you? I know as you look back at the 3 that you maybe put down on your list, they may or may not be sponsor material. And let's talk through a few things that I've gleaned through my own life, but also really through some research that's proven what works and what doesn't work in terms of choosing your sponsors. Consider putting efficacy over affinity. What does this mean? So you may have an affinity for someone. They might be a role model for you in a certain industry or in a certain space or because you like their personality. And they might be a good mentor for you in that role. But for a sponsor, you want people who are going to be effective in advocating for you. So this means this should be somebody that you're considering who has the power and who has the seat to be able to make those decisions and to help move things in your direction. They may not be in your particular area or industry. It may be somebody adjacent, but who has those connections and who has the power to make those decisions. Don't be put off by leadership style. And this could be male-female leadership style differences. It could be personality. Just because you don't like how somebody leads in their own space does not mean they can't be an effective sponsor for you. I've had a lot of men sponsors. I've mentioned a few of them. Their style may not be exactly how I like to lead, but they've been able to make these decisions and help me to get in the right spaces at the right time. So get a little bit over your bias with the leadership piece, knowing that it's you that they're putting out there, and that doesn't necessarily reflect your own leadership style. Also, sadly, friends don't make the best sponsors. They can be a great cheerleader, they can be a great supporter and advisor, they can be a mentor, but you need people who are going to look at you and say, this is what that you have to offer in a certain space. And it's not emotional. Again, it's them investing their name into you. So who has that right authority level? If it's a few people up, if it's somebody directly above you, or maybe somebody else out in the community. Again, thinking a little differently about how sponsorship might come to you. And we all want to impress our boss, but you really need to pick somebody who has that ability to change your career. And that may not be your boss. That may be somebody a couple of rows up. It may be somebody on a board. It may be someone in the community that you know, but it most likely will not be your boss. And we have to get uncomfortable with thinking about this. I know oftentimes I think I'm not ready quite to do that. It's not the right time. Sponsors are going to help challenge you to think a little differently. We'll push you further, and we'll get you in front of the right people. And then it's up to you to say yes And we'll learn by doing that, much like Sheryl Sandberg said. I have to put a Beyonce quote in here. Queen Bey is awesome. So power's not given to you, you have to take it. We have to ask for it. We have to invite people to be sponsors and to step up for us, and that takes some commitment and time. But you're worth it. You're a game changer, and that's why you're here today. Thank you. Questions? I don't know if I know I'm between you and lunch, but are there any questions?
Raise your hand if you have a question. We'll come directly to you on either side of the room.
I got some over here. I got a mic right behind you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Erica. Everything you said was really powerful and so spot on. My question comes from a different standpoint of being a minority woman. How do we sometimes break into that? Because a lot of times, and I can speak for myself, we may not have the legacy of going to like a big school or big college or someone in our family that was on a board before us or even exposed us to that. Luckily, I am on a couple of boards now myself, and I really enjoy it. But what advice would you give to somebody who is a minority woman and some of those pictures didn't look like us, that we would feel comfortable or feel like we fit in that environment?
And of course, I can't speak to your experience because I haven't lived it. I think there's a huge opportunity right now because of the focus right now on representation for you to ask. I think this group of people in this room is a good first step. I see actually a few people that I know here that I know are leaders in their own right. You are a leader too. Thank you for your service on those boards. I think too, maybe it's making a list of where you want to serve and then how do you get on that path to where you want to be. And so asking the right people will depend probably on the direction that you want to go is what I would suggest. And so who are those leaders either in that particular group or if it's in a company or for a position or a role, and then finding who in your network do you know that can make that introduction, because it's all about relationships at the end.
We have a question over here.
I was like, where'd you go?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Nancy. My name's Conchetta Ferlato. I'm with Procter & Gamble. I loved the tips on how to think about picking a sponsor. Sometimes it's intimidating to reach out to somebody many levels above or that you don't know. How do you recommend doing that in an authentic way that's true to yourself but creates that and facilitates that conversation?
Well, I think Julie did a really great job describing making it concise. If you are making that direct ask or if it's someone that you know that's making that introduction, I do think keeping it focused and having a list of things that you want to talk about. Time is short and time is money for a lot of people, and so making sure that you're targeted and you let them know this is what I'm asking about, so it doesn't feel like kind of a switch at the end, so that if they say yes, then they know clearly what it is that's being expected of them. I will say too, I think most people know about the concept of sponsorship, so it may need to be phrased in a way that makes sense, but I think in terms of what the time commitment is, know what it is that you're going to ask so that they feel that you're prepared. I would also suggest if they don't know you at all, that you have some background information that you can share. It doesn't have to be as formal as a CV or a resume, but I think allowing them to know you a little better, maybe clicking on some links that you can share in that email when you reach out, just so they can do a little bit of understanding of who you are, what you've done, and what inspires you.
Thank you. We had a question back here.
Hi, I'm Crystal Render of Magnificent Morsels Catering. I first and foremost want to say thank you for defining the difference between sponsorship, coaching, mentoring, because I totally had some of them meshed together and was expecting things that obviously weren't in that alignment. So my real question is, do you think it's smart to have more than one sponsor, or is it that you need to focus on one that can be extremely efficient?
I think it depends on how much time you have to invest in it. I would recommend more than one, but I think starting off with one makes complete sense. But the goal that you have with a sponsor, it can be achieved by one, or it may need to happen with a few people. I guess it depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve. I have a few just because I have different spheres that I need to have impacted for me, so it's very important that I'm represented in different rooms, if that makes sense.
We have another question here.
Hi, Nancy. I'm Chidamduru from Procter & Gamble.
Hello.
Have you ever been rejected when you ask someone if they would be your sponsor, or did you ever have to break a sponsorship relationship because you realized it wasn't the right one anymore?
That's a good question. I did have a gentle no because they just did not have the time, but they did believe in what I was trying to achieve, so they suggested I connect with someone else in their sphere, and that person is still my sponsor today. So I do think sunsetting of sponsors, I think, is only fair, as you would consider any relationship in your life, and thinking about, is it not serving its purpose any longer? Do I not have the time to commit to it? Or has the need been fulfilled in terms of that progression? So that, I think, is a little more nuanced, and it probably would depend on the relationship that you have with that sponsor. But the no, it's hard to get a no. But typically when you're asking, they're kind enough to suggest kind of here's the next step as an alternative.
All right, we're behind you, Nancy. We keep popping everywhere.
I love this.
Hi.
Hi.
You did a fantastic job.
Oh, you're kind.
My name is Nakia Salman. I'm with GE Aerospace. Many times we're in a room where people are being talked about, and many times our sponsor is in that room. I think for many of us, sometimes the feedback that we need to hear about us doesn't get back to us. So the question I have for you is, for people who you have sponsored, and you've built the safety and the trust for you to tell them what they need to hear, what did they do to make you feel comfortable to tell them the truth?
What did they do for me to feel comfortable telling them, and vice versa? That mutual exchange. For my sponsors, where it's been most effective, I think at the outset we had kind of just a level field of saying we need to be honest and we need to have some feedback that might be hard to hear at times. And for the most part, I'm pretty transparent, as you probably can tell, or as I say later, I hope I get to meet many of you. Honesty is really important for me and who I am, and a currency, and so I think they knew that at the outset. So I do think having some expectations that you want to bring to the table and making sure that they're comfortable with being honest. I would think at a sponsor level, knowing that they're putting their brand out there for you, their own name, that they will be pretty honest with feedback too. But I think from the outset, when you build those relationships, it's important to have that kind of boundary so that they understand what you're looking for. So ask. Hey, hello.
Hi. My name's Annie Brown. I am an entrepreneur. I own Laughing Bees. I make the world's best honey caramels.
There's some delicious sweets here, people.
There will be some at the Incubator Kitchen
Wonderful.
Collective's table tonight, so be sure and grab some. I have a question for you as an entrepreneur. So a lot of your advice was for people who work in a company to find a sponsor. My background is I've been a homeschooling mom for 10 or so years, had part-time jobs as I was doing that, and then in the last couple of years started Laughing Bees. So I don't have a lot of connections with a lot of game changer people other than everyone in this room. What advice would you give someone like me when I'm looking for a sponsor?
I've been in your shoes. I've stayed at home. I've worked part-time. I've worked full-time. I've run an organization now. So when I say indirect, it was a very meandering path. I do think what helped me most was that community service and community engagement. I don't want to put too much on boards of nonprofits, but there are some really great connections that you can make there, so that when I was building out my brand, people knew who I was based on those experiences. And you can look at those boards and you can see the makeup of who they are, and you can work your way towards that. I think that's probably the simplest. The other way would be is if you have a target for a potential sponsor or someone you want to get to know, and that you have a mutual relationship. Again, it's managing your own networks that you have right now. And knowing that you're an incubator kitchen, you have a lot of networks that maybe you aren't aware of already, because it's beloved in the community. Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah.
Good morning. Laura Kumler with TriHealth, but I am the director for Bethesda Foundation within TriHealth.
Oh, wonderful.
So I've accidentally, we need to be intentional, right, for ourselves. But what I've found in this tough hiring market is that I've had some candidates that I saw a spark in, but they weren't quite ready.
Yes.
So when I deliver their regrets, I say, but if you want to, let's connect.
Wow.
So any recommendations, because I've accidentally like stumbled into this with 3 individuals. Any
So
recommendations?
you're a sponsor?
Right, or a mentor
Or
or something,
mentor,
right?
or spintor,
So any
yeah.
recommendations on that side of it? Because I feel like we should be investing in some of our future women leaders as well.
That's awesome that you're doing that. The more that we can lift up others, in my opinion, especially women, I think teaching that kind of next generation how to get there is important if you have the time to do that. There are a wealth of resources that I think, we can talk afterwards in terms of like how you can approach that. I think how formal you want to do it depends again on the time and how much you're investing, or if you're just helping as a follow-up with them. That's incredible.
Hi. My name is Meriden McGraw. I'm the owner of Meriden Mental Fitness, and we teach easily implemented skills to women and high-functioning executives to avoid burnout and decrease stress. Yes. Work is busy.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of it.
Yeah.
So my question expands upon, I forget her name, whoever's making really good honey.
You're going to be known as the honey lady.
Yeah. So I think as an entrepreneur, you have people in mind that are doing what you're doing really well. They quickly see you as competition. So if you're going to someone and saying, hey, I'd love you to be my sponsor, I'm doing the same thing you're doing, that's immediately someone who's vying for the same business as you. And also, I know sponsor is a common word within the corporate space. It's not really in the community entrepreneurial space.
Right.
If I DM'd someone on Instagram and said, hey, your business is cool, can you be my sponsor? What does that mean? And so my question for you is there a job description you give someone when you ask them to be your sponsor? Is this something, hey, here's what this means, here's what I'm looking for? Because I have clients that are out there speaking really kindly about me, hey, you should do this because I did it and it was great. But I don't have a sponsor or mentorship relationship, and I've been wanting that in this space, and I think it's really difficult to find as an entrepreneur. So any additional advice in that space would be wonderful.
Well, maybe Game Changers can help set up an entrepreneurship pipeline for this. But I do think you're right. A few things. When you spoke about the competition, I think that's why when I said efficacy over affinity, that might fit in your case specifically because you don't want it to be a competition, but you want to have some maybe shared life experiences and some skills that at least have that overlap at some point. So I would challenge you maybe to think outside of your specific industry and look in an entrepreneurial space that wouldn't be as much of a direct competition if you feel like that could be helpful. And you're right. I was talking to my daughters about this speech because I was so excited and kind of nervous. All these women here that are leaders in the community, and they said, "Mom, I've never even heard of this term, right?" And they're younger, but they're engaged. I mean, my oldest daughter went to Harvard, so I figure like at least Harvard should be talking about this. And they are, but not at her level. So I think defining the relationship, you don't have to give it that term, sponsorship, but I do think knowing that what you're asking for them to do at some point they need to know, as you're having these conversations, that this is a very specific ask for them if they believe in you to be able to put their name out there for you when you're not around. And so maybe it's thinking about brand and moving your brand forward. I think there are different words that you could probably use that might fit a little bit better in the culture of the entrepreneurial space.
Nancy, my question kind of,
where am I?
Hi.
Rachel.
I kind of go back into what Mare just asked and really more asking your opinion of sponsorship was a brand new word for me, right? And so can entrepreneurs have corporate sponsors? Like, is that a relationship, right? I mean, I think that's a part of this conversation. For the entrepreneurs in the room, it's not just an entrepreneurial sponsor. So how and who, right? Is that a natural progression for us to think like we should be reaching out into that world? Again, I think it ties into this program, but I would love to know your thoughts.
I think yes. I think where I got frustrated doing research for this particular presentation was that it was such a tight definition of what sponsorship was, and it was very much focused on the P&Gs and Krogers and kind of go a couple of rungs up. And I think, again, challenging that idea, thinking differently about your entire network. And so if you're an entrepreneur, that could be a larger for-profit company. Again, I think if you feel that it's going to move you and your work and your brand forward, absolutely. But I would also say that about community leaders that you might be connected with too. So in my mind, it doesn't just stay in that narrow category. And I'm hoping that as this term kind of evolves over time, that eventually we'll see it as more than just a direct company kind of connection.
Are there any other questions that we missed? All right. Well, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. So grateful. Thank you so much.